The new indie game Not for Broadcast, which just released in early access, has been getting a decent amount of attention recently, with some people comparing it to Lucas Pope's seminal classic Papers, Please, which I covered in my most recent video, The Best Video Game Made by One Person. And this comparison is for good reason. Papers, Please features you playing as a customs officer working at a border checkpoint for a corrupt dystopian government, while Not for Broadcast has you working as the producer for the most popular news show in England. Although this isn't modern-day England, it's an alternate reality 1980s England, and at the start of the game, a new political party has just risen to power. Think V for Vendetta, but if it was written by the team behind Monty Python. The game starts off with a simple tutorial level. Turns out, you're just the janitor really, but the guy who is supposed to be manning the screens has left, although he's nice enough at least to call in and walk you through how to do it. Similar to other games of this ilk, your job is to keep all the metaphorical plates spinning, a task that can be easier said than done. You have to be ready to switch from camera to camera depending on who's talking, and make sure not to stay on one person too long, even if they do go on a bit of a monologue. Also, if anybody starts to swear, there is a censor button to bleep out any of the bad language. And there's even a bit of interference you'll have to adjust the satellite dish on the building to avoid. There are more mechanics that get introduced as the game goes along, including one level where you have to avoid touching buttons that will electrify you, but all of these serve to keep you constantly on your toes. And the game does a good job at this. The broadcasts are long, with the tutorial level lasting about 20 minutes, and the other two levels currently in the game lasting closer to 30 minutes. At first, I was a little worried that this was all Not for Broadcast was going to be. Because while running the live shows is the meat and potatoes of the game, one of the best parts of Papers, Please is the overarching narrative, helping your family, your coworkers, and possibly rebelling against the corrupt government. I'm happy to report that in between each of these levels, Not for Broadcast gives you choices to make, and they do seem to have consequences. One of the first major choices in the game features your brother-in-law begging to borrow your passport to escape from the country, since he's afraid of what the new government will do to him. My first playthrough, I gave it to him, which made my wife happy, but later the government was angry at me because I didn't have my passport to register for the new government-mandated IDs. On my second playthrough, I refused to give him the passport, and then at Christmas, my brother-in-law and my wife treated me like crap. My main worry, and I'm sure for the developers as well, is can they stick the landing? So far, the game has only 3 of these broadcast levels with little vignettes in between. And, similar to Papers, Please, they have a little shop where you can use excess funds to purchase cosmetic upgrades for your desk, or items that will actually make your job easier, even though you can't possibly afford them in the game's current state. No matter what, the game is only 2 hours tops at this point. They say on the Steam page they'd like to make 10 full broadcasts for the final game. And personally, I'm slightly worried that this may be too much. In just the first 3 levels, there were already some changes on the bigger narrative from my actions, with my second playthrough showing some new scenes entirely. For example, in one playthrough, a prominent company announced their big children's toy for the holiday season, and I chose to run an ad for it, despite being prompted not to do so. And that toy ended up seriously maiming several children, putting the company and its CEO in hot water. But then, I showed a new product they were working on and seemed to paint them in a positive light. On top of this, in one of the side sections, you could essentially choose to invest in that company, which I could imagine tying into another mechanic of wealth or how your family might end up doing. But with every small change, it requires a ton of new shooting from the actors. And this is where I'd like to talk about some of the acting in the game. Honestly, it's a little kitschy, but I think that 100% works for this game. I mean, honestly, apart from maybe Her Story, I can't really think of another FMV game that takes itself entirely seriously. And I love it here. I don't want to spoil too much about the broadcasts, because they are what really makes the game unique. But one of my favorite bits had me covering a made-up sport in which 2 players had to try and not throw a ping pong ball into a bucket. Which is obviously ridiculous. But the acting of the whole scene, which goes on for minutes and was shot in one continuous take, is actually quite funny. Most notably some of the excellent improving from the sportscaster himself, who sometimes seemed like he knew that the whole thing was fake.
Now we have the ceremonial changing of the ends. And of course now they go back to the starting positions, as that makes sense.
But herein lies another issue I've seen the game getting some criticism for, that the off-the-walls comedy of some parts contrasts a little bit too deeply with the grounded, gritty commentary on the corrupt government that the game is going for. And I'll agree with you somewhat, but I don't know, I still really enjoy the comedy of the game. One of the first things the new government does is take all the money away from the wealthy to distribute it to the poor, and all the old wealthy people stage a nude protest as a result. And yeah, that's ridiculous, but at the end of the 2-hour early access playthrough, we see a short trailer for the rest of the game advertising a deep, dark anti-government resistance that seems really genuine. Ultimately, I think there's a fine line to ride here, and for me, I'm really enjoying it, but I could see others being rubbed the wrong way with it. One thing I will complain about is that after each level, you're directed to an archive room of all the footage you've played. Here, you can watch the final broadcast you delivered for that level, or even watch some of the ads you chose, but you can't skip around in them. You have to start from the beginning and watch all the way through. Most of the parts I wanted to see were right after I switched to a commercial break, and the news anchor or guests were all cussing each other out. But if I wanted to see that, I'd have to either tank my score in the level, or watch through the entire thing again for several minutes, just to get to the 30 or so seconds of new footage. Also, once you've played through, you can't go back to an older level. You have to restart the game. Contrast this with Papers, Please, where you could create a new save in between every level. The good news is, the developers are actively asking for feedback from fans, and are active on the Steam message board for the game, and in their Discord. So I'd expect this to get patched in fairly quickly. Ultimately, I really can't wait to see what the developer, Not Games, does with Not for Broadcast. I think they've built a really interesting gameplay concept with a potential for an amazing payoff with the overarching story, if they can stick the landing. Right now, I love the idea of live editing a news show under a corrupt government, trying to change the minds of people to fit whatever your agenda might be. I just hope that the developers are able to add enough stuff to make it feel like the change you're impacting feels real and rewarding. Right now, they're predicting the game will take another 1.5 years to finish, but that they'll continue to update it as it goes along, so we might see new levels pop up in the coming months. And the game is currently available for only $15. Which, for what the game is right now, I already feel like I got my money's worth. And if you're still on the fence after everything I've said, they have a prologue up for free on Steam, which includes the game's first level, and I'll include a link to that down below. Thank you very much for watching our video review of Not for Broadcast. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to our channel or leaving a like or even a comment down below, as it greatly improves our visibility on YouTube and helps us out a ton. Speaking of helping us out, we do now have a Patreon, where you can support us financially if you so choose, which will also get you a bonus episode of our weekly live game show we do about the current gaming news called Around the Monitor. We also have a Discord where you can interact with us, talk about gaming news, share memes, and whatever else floats your boat. Ultimately, we're still a pretty small channel, and we have the time to talk with people. But either way, thank you once again for watching this video, and until next time, have a wonderful day.